was born in Bristol in 1955, which makes me 21. Is that okay? Okay. Long time ago. So my parents, sadly my parents died a number of years ago. I was one of 6 children in the family. I've mentioned here that I had a brother died when I was 16 in a car accident. And I'll talk to you about that a bit later, about how God had healed me through the grieving process of that. So Mum hid from us the fact that we were Jewish. She always used to wear a Magen David in Hebrew, which is a Star of David. But what we do know is that on a Friday evening, she would have what we call Shabbat, where Granny would light candles and they would recite the scriptures. So, frustrated with life on the next one. Okay. As a teenager, at 18, I ran away to sea, as you do as a boy. And I worked with a shipping company called Union Castle and got a 3-year apprenticeship, but I was at sea for about 4 years as a chef. Qualified in working mainly in the first class end of the ship. On the next one, sous chef. That was me when I was 21, a long time ago, isn't it? So that was me then on the ship. Next one. Okay, and within the cuisine, because I used to own a restaurant in London before I went into social work, and I got awards in French cuisine, which is wonderful. I don't tell I hope my wife's not looking online. I taught my wife how to cook, but don't say anything. Okay. You didn't hear that, did you? Okay. Next one. Okay, these are just pictures of some of the people I've cooked for. You can see there. Anybody remember? Probably she died in 1981. Princess Alice of Athlone. She was Queen Victoria's granddaughter. She was on the ship in about 1976, 77, but she died about 1981. Remember Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac? No? I'm sure some of the older folk here were. He used to come into my restaurant on most days. Norman Wisdom. Princess Anne, she's a great connoisseur of wines. I shouldn't be saying that, should I? I cooked for Princess Anne. Tommy Cooper, England football team, you know all about them, don't you? Okay, and Cliff Richard, I cooked for Cliff Richard in Amsterdam when I was a missionary for a couple of years there. So I suppose what I'm saying to you on the next heading there, yeah. So why was the 13th of September 1976 so important to me at 8 o'clock in the morning? Coming from a secular family, it was quite difficult. I never really grew up knowing no God at all, really. And I met a group called Living Sound that were traveling from England. They were from Oklahoma originally, but traveling to Cape Town and then on to Durban. And one night, they waited for me when I was serving the passengers on the ship and said they wanted to talk to you about Jesus. I wasn't really interested, but they said, if you believe and say this prayer with us, you'll experience the power of God. And that's what I wanted to say to you this evening. At the end of the evening, when I sing over you in Hebrew, the Aaronic benediction, which is the Lord bless you and keep you, as you know, as I declare that over you, and I'll translate it back into English, throughout the evening, I just want you guys to actually ask the Lord, what is it you want from me to say to the Lord for 2025? Is there somebody that needs a healing? Is there parents that don't believe in Yeshua or Jesus? What is your need this evening within your family? And I was thinking about Aidan. Is it Aidan? Is that lovely man, Aidan? Is he here? Aidan, just to encourage you, I think your son has gone back to Australia, hasn't he? Sorry, I teach sign language as well. We talk about Australia. My son went away from the Lord for many years, and he took a year out to Australia, and a local church invited him to a church meeting, and he wonderfully came back to faith. He became an elder in a local church. He met his wife, Charlotte, who's a Jewish Christian as well, and he's now gone on with God and wonderfully saved. But he fell away for a while, period. But as parents, you know what it's like. All you can do is just pray for your children that they come back to God. But maybe, Aidan, that's an encouragement to you. So thank you. We will pray for you. Yeah, so why was that important? The following morning, I remember this prayer ringing in my ear in the cabin I was working at. Anyway, this time I said this prayer with all my heart. And I called out to the Lord. And as I started calling out, I just broke down in tears, and I went into the washroom area. Just before I had a shower, I just threw water over my face. It was almost like baptizing myself. And all of a sudden, the Spirit of God just actually hit me. For about 3 days, I couldn't come down off this experience. So powerful was this experience that I had to go around the ship telling everybody. The first passenger I met was a Jewish person. I led him to the Lord. And then I found out that 2 of my friends who were waiters on the ship. And by the end of the week, we baptized 6 waiters in the crew swimming pool and set up our own Bible study group. Not that we knew much, and our own prayer meeting. That shows you the demonstration of the power of the God that can hit you when you first become a believer. So I always thank God for that. The funny thing was about the working as a chef, you got sort of what we call 5 sort of areas in the kitchen. We had the fish chef come over, and the vegetable chef and so on, and the baker. And what they would do is, in front of me, they would put 5 loaves of bread on the table and 5 fishes. And all the chef brigade said, Grant, would you turn these into 5,000 so we can save the shipping company a fortune? So it was those sort of types of humor. But it was just a banter. But I would just say to them, look, can I talk to you about God? No, it's fine. But as I say, the experience was I never did drugs, I never drank. Women, just girls in ports and stuff was my vice at that time. But I never took drink or drugs. And this experience was so high that I just had to tell people about Jesus and what he'd done for me. And that was the power and demonstration, as I say, of what God did. It's that interesting that for 5 nights I wept and cried. It's a personal thing in my life. My brother that died 5 years before, Paul, when he died in a car accident, I was really close to him and went to the funeral. I couldn't cry. I put lemon in my eyes on the funeral day. Anyway, for 5 years, I just couldn't come to terms that my brother had died. Anyway, for those 5 nights, when I first became a believer, I just wept and read the scriptures. I couldn't put the Bible down. I was reading like 40 chapters a night in my cabin. Anyway, I just felt the Lord say to me, look, Paul, my brother, he's with me. Don't worry. You can give him back to me now. And since that time, I just felt God say to me, look, you've grieved over him now. You can release him back to me. Grief hits people in different ways, doesn't it? And I know some of you, if you've lost mums and dads and things and family, which I know you have. Interestingly enough, when that musical group got off the ship in Cape Town, something really strange happened. I said, Lord, at that stage, I was borrowing a Bible from that music group for the people that became Christians. And I said, Lord, I don't know much about you. I've got this Bible that I've got to give back now. How do we pray and how do we read scripture and all those things? Anyway, on the day we docked in Cape Town, something, as I say, interesting happened. This waiter came out of the first-class restaurant and swore. I wouldn't obviously swear at all, but as he was swearing, he was cursing, and he said, look at these 5 books, and threw them straight into what they call the pig's wheel. I thought pig's wheel being Jewish. So as he threw it into this bin, I felt the Lord say to me, go over there and take all those 5 books out. What this waiter was waiting for was what they used to call a dropsy, which is money or a tip at the end of the voyage. Anyway, as I went over there, I dusted off all of these books, and all the 5 books were from Billy Graham. The first one, what a new Christian needs to know, how a new Christian needs to pray, how a new Christian needs to read the Bible. All those 5 books just encouraged me to keep going on. And as soon as I got to the port, I went into a Christian bookshop and bought some Bibles, and we set up our own Bible study group. It's amazing, isn't it, how God takes care of you. When I got home, my parents were horrified. I think it would have been easier becoming a Buddhist. And as my father was in business in Bristol at the time, and I remember going into the shop where he was trading, and there was a customer there that it was annoying the family because he kept on coming. He was a clairvoyant, and he kept on trying to get my mum and dad into these seances because the family was still grieving at that time over my brother that died. Anyways, I came into the shop. My father said, oh, this is Grant. He's just seen the light. He's now met Jesus. Anyway, this clairvoyant started to scream, and he said, I can see fire surrounding you. Stay away from me, stay away from me. Anyway, we had a guard dog within the business. As we opened the door, this man was running out the door, and Susie, the guard dog, ran up the road after him, biting his backside, and just chased him up the road. And we never saw him again. Not surprised. As I mentioned, Billy Graham would then have further impact on my family in 1988 when I took my mum and dad to a mission at Earl's Court. On the next slide then, So my father got me involved into Freemasonry, and I was classified as what they call Lewis, which is a son of a Freemason. I'm happy to debate. I'm not going to condemn anybody that's involved in it. I'm just saying for me it wasn't right. It clashed with my faith. So I wrote to the Masonic Lodge in Bristol, renounced it, burnt all my regalia. My father wouldn't speak to me for several years because he was 32nd degree Freemason, worshipful master on 2 occasions. So I do speak with authority on this particular subject. I do talk on it. But as I say, I'm not condemning anybody. I'm just saying for me, it wasn't right. I also then, the corruption that I saw going on through the family, because of Freemasonry, I had to resign from my father's company later on and had prayer for it. But it was just something for me I couldn't get involved with. Okay, so I'm just jumping around a bit here. On slide 10 on Amsterdam. Okay. So I then, after leaving the Merchant Navy in 1977, we went straight over to Amsterdam. I was working with YWAM and working on the streets on the Dam Square. So I was working with drug addicts and prostitutes. There was a team of us. Some of you may remember what we call the Ark, which was behind Central Station. That was a most amazing time. As I say, worked there for 2 years. Later then, after I came back from London, our 3 children were born, Benjamin, Hannah, and Miriam. They're now, Miriam's 40, Hannah's 42, and Ben's 44. And we've got 9 grandchildren now, quite a lot. It's very expensive, as you can imagine. On the next slide then, this sort of important point on Concorde. Okay, the reason I'm talking about this story now is because my parents emigrated to America in 1978 and set up a business there, moved from the UK. And I was always struggling, saying to Mum, can you talk to me more about our Jewish roots? And there was just a silence within the family. Anyway, on this particular day, you can see the date there, it's ever etched in my mind, on the 7th of March, 1983. When I was in my restaurant in London, I got a call from a dear friend of mine, Mark, who was senior manager and director for TNT Skypack at Heathrow Airport. And he's on the phone saying to me, Grant, you need to help me out. He said, all my staff have just gone down, they're all sick, and I need a courier to go over to New York at 6:15. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, well, you're joking, aren't you? I said, I'm running a business here, I can't do that. He said, look, it's a free flight on Concorde. I said, I'll be there. So got to Heathrow at 6:15, and 3 hours and 14 minutes later, I was in New York. Most incredible experience, which is another story. Anyway, so when I got to New York, my parents' family were living in New Jersey, and the conversation in brief was around our Jewish roots. So Mum and Dad then sort of started telling us more about Granny and the Jewish side of her family. My mother's side were what we call Ashkenazi Jews from France, a few hundred years before. Okay, so slide 12 then. Just flopping back to that on Concorde, what I saw that really is a first-class flight, which was about £8,000 in those days. It was collecting my birthright. I felt the Lord wanted to honour me and give me that back to me. So slide 12 is about Billy Graham. Great man. Okay, so in 1988, I took Mum and Dad and my sister to a Billy Graham mission at Earl's Court. And when it came to the point of going forward for salvation, I said to Mum and Dad, look, I'll go up to the front with you. My sister and my mum became believers in Yeshua, as we say in Hebrew. And I said to Dad, look, Dad, why don't you come up with us? I said, he respects Billy Graham hugely. And he said, son, it's not for me. I'm not going to go up. I don't want it. And I prayed for my father continually for 39 years. Anyway, it obviously broke my heart because he didn't want to go up. But you have to leave people. People come to salvation in their own time, don't they? You can't force people. So even since then, obviously, I continued to pray for him. On the next slide, you'll see there, it's about Uncle Duncan at the top. Okay, this is where the sort of miracle comes in. I want people just to reflect on this, about how far God will go to save somebody and bring them into his kingdom, and how merciful he is. These stories are quite dramatic, and I make no exception for them. I just want to give you a taste of God's love for his people. I got a call one day. I did a complete career change. I did one of these psychometric tests, and I left school at 16 without any formal education. Although I did an apprenticeship as a French chef and owned a restaurant and stuff, I had to go back to study and do A-levels before I got to Brunel University to become a social worker. There's a dear friend of mine at the back here, Jane, when I used to work in the Cookstown office now with you. Jane's a lovely person. And so what happened then at the university, I got this call from my auntie. Obviously, she's Jewish. And she said to me, Grant, she said, I know you believe in God, but please could you come down to Bristol from London and pray for your uncle? Because he's just had this second massive stroke, and he's in Frenchy Hospital, which is just off the M32 as you go out of London towards Bristol. Anyway, I thought, I've got no money. What do I do, Lord? And I just had to borrow some petrol for my car. You know what it's like at your university, you've got nothing. So anyway, I went straight down. I just had this impression in my mind that I had to go immediately to the hospital. So I got there, and the nurses said that your uncle can hear you. He's in an induced coma. And I've checked this out with nurses and doctors before, and apparently they just encourage you to talk to the person that's in this induced coma. So the nurse said, look, he's been in this state for about 3 days, and he was on the bed grasping for air, and you could see the torture and the torment on this man's face, grasping for air. And I just whispered into his ear, and he was my favourite uncle, and I just whispered into his ear and said, Uncle Duncan, this is me, Grant, your favourite nephew. And a lot of people had, I'm not uncovering him in this way, but a lot of the family didn't like him because there was a lot of domestic violence in the family. He would beat his children up, he would beat his wife up, and it was just awful to watch. But for some reason, he just loved me as a member of the family. And the 3 oldest brothers, in the end, set on him and said, you touch our mother again, and we'll do you in. Anyway, so there was no more violence after that period. But anyway, as I said, I'm now back into the story of him being in hospital. So I said to the Lord, I'm here, I'm going to pray for him, but what do I do? Because he can't respond to anything. And I promise you, in sign language, it's a sign for trust, honesty, justice, integrity. And I promise you I'm telling the truth here. Anyway, so as I sat there, I was just praying, pouring my heart out to God. I said, what do I do? Because I know the Lord had shown me that he would go within 2 weeks, because he had this massive stroke. Anyway, so I felt the presence of God say to me, I'll show it to you, place his hand on top of yours, and with his middle finger, get him to tap yes, twice for yes, and once for no. And we had this conversation, difficult conversation. He was really struggling to tap my fingers. Anyway, I said, look, God has shown me that you won't be here within 2 weeks from this day, on Saturday in 2 weeks' time. But you need salvation. You need to know our Messiah, because he's Jewish, obviously. And I said, I'm going to take you through the Lord's Prayer for salvation, as you know, from John 3:16. And anyway, I said, do you want to pray with me? And he taps twice for yes. So we slowly went through the salvation message. And at the end of it, I said, Uncle, have you accepted our Messiah into your heart? I promise you, tears are pouring down this man's face. He's crying and crying. I'm crying with him. And you could feel the presence of God. His face just lit up like an angel. And you could feel this almost tense, this torture coming out of his heart. And I hugged him, and we always do the Aaronic benediction as a way of blessing. And I said, look, Duncan, I'm not going to see you after today, and one day we'll meet each other in heaven, and we'll rejoice together. Sorry, I'm trying to hold my emotions here. Anyway, I prayed for him and anointed him with the Aaronic benediction, which I know my friend Moshe knows the prayer, the Lord bless you and keep you. And 2 weeks later to the day, he died. And why am I telling you this story? Because I thought, Lord, if you can save such a man, you can save my father, who was a 32nd degree Mason, didn't really want to go on with God. But I've always felt, Lord, why did you show me that or introduce me to that picture of him being in that coma for 3 days? Jonah 2 verse 2, it talks about in my distress, I called to the Lord and he answered me from the depths of the grave. I called for help and you heard my cry. I can't say to you that that's what my uncle was praying, but if you're in a coma for 3 days and you know you're about to die because it was so severe, what are you going to do? You're like Jonah, you're going to cry out to God, aren't you, to do something in your life to save you. And that's what I believe that he did. And in fact, I never forgot the prayers. I'm still going on here. And 39 years from the day I became a believer in Jesus, my wife and I went to New Jersey where my parents were living at the time. And this is the salvation about how God can touch, our people that we love. Give me some trust here in this when I tell you this story, because I can only tell you what happened to me. Okay, so over breakfast, I said to my wife and to my mother, I said, look, can you just leave Dad and I alone? I need to talk to him. And I knew that God had impressed on me that you have to talk to him about me being a Messiah. And as I sat with him over breakfast, I had this thought come into my mind. Say, I wanted to rebuke my father and tell him how he and I didn't get on at all. He was that generation from the war that didn't speak to their children. And he had his favorite sons, and we would always fight. And I just never got on with him. And there was always those clashing. As try as I may, trying to love him in my own way, special way, we never clicked. So there was always that heartfelt thing with him and I. Anyway, as I was about to rebuke him and tell him off, because the Lord said to me, you need to talk to him about me, because again, I felt the Lord say he was going to be gone within 3 months. So anyway, as we're talking, I heard the audible voice of God say to me, don't you dare rebuke your father. And it was like a teacher screaming in my ear, don't you dare rebuke your father. You remember the 5th commandment, honor your parents so that all may go well with you. And I'm in floods of tears in front of my father, crying my heart out. And Dad says to me, this is a war veteran I'm talking about here, a tough man in his time. He starts to cry, and we're all crying together. He said, what's wrong? I said, the Lord's just told me to apologize to you about the way I was as a teenager. And he's crying again. He said, would you forgive me too? I was thinking, so we were hugging each other. And I said, Dad, look, the Lord has shown me that you won't be here in 3 months' time, but you need to accept our Messiah for salvation. He said, I know. I said, what do you mean I know? He said, the Lord appeared to me in my bedroom last night and told me you were going to talk to me about him. I promise you this is a true story. So as we're just crying together and embracing each other, I said, Dad, this is what you need to do for salvation. And he's crying, I'm crying. Again, we did the Aaronic benediction, and Dad's crying again. It was just very emotional. And I said, can I ask you a frank question, Dad? My dad was always in black and white. And he said to me, yes, ask me. I said, what did the Lord say to you in your bedroom last night? He said, every word that you said is true. Every word that you said is true, and I've accepted him into my heart. And 3 months later on Yom Kippur, although we need Jesus to get to heaven, but on Yom Kippur, Jews believe if you die on Yom Kippur, you go straight to heaven because the books are open on Yom Kippur. Anyway, my father died on Yom Kippur, but Mum said that when the pastor came in to pray for my dad, she said his face just lit up like an angel, and he just slipped into death. You think it's very emotional. But isn't it amazing how God, I thought it was going to have to be me that talked to him about the Lord, but the Lord was honoring me for 39 years of prayer. So all I'm saying to you tonight is please don't give up on prayer for your family. Please don't give up. So, things sort of going on then, really, part of my life really then went to university. I did a psychometric test. It said, rather than being a chef, you'd be better off as a social worker. I think that was probably right. Qualified in 1995, and then worked my way up to as a senior social worker. I worked for the Northern Trust here, mainly specialising with children with special needs. Expert witness in court regarding interpreting sign language and things for disabled people in abuse cases. And I retired just about 2.5 years ago. Still teaching sign language and enjoying it now because I've got freedom and time to teach. And there's a wonderful system out, if you ever want to know. They've just brought in a new system for signing for churches and fellowships now. I could talk to you about another time. Okay, next bit then, Messianic fellowships. So coming on towards the end now. So I set up 2 Messianic fellowships, one in London that's still going. I think 1993, I think I set that up. I set another one up in Ballymena, but only lasted for 2 years. It was to try and help the church understand their Jewish roots of the faith. Been to Donetsk, my favorite place. I love Ukrainian people and the Lebanese. And, been out to Donetsk many times and taken Arctic lorries out, trucks and things, taken dental equipment out. We set up soup kitchens in Donetsk. You know where there's a trouble with Russia at the moment, what they call the Donbass. Wonderful people on that particular area, but you can't go in there anymore. So we collected over £50,000 for the Ukrainian people over a period of years. Okay, so coming on to the end now, look at this. I was looking through my memorabilia. I found this from 1977. Your fellowship is called the Lifeboat, isn't it? Who got the certificate here? Can you see that? So I became a qualified lifeboat man for your church. 6 foot tall, blue eyes, blonde, white. You can see there, so I became a qualified lifeboat man. I did the ship steering as well. So why is this important? As I said, I just thought it was not by chance that I'm here tonight and looking at this particular certificate. So we know that Nicodemus in John chapter 3, verse 16, when Jesus was talking about being born again, in a sense, now in that bit, being a qualified lifeboat man, what would happen to you guys this evening if you don't know Messiah, you don't know Jesus, and the ship sinks? You need to get into a lifeboat, don't you? And in a sense, I'm the one that's steering that lifeboat this evening. It's a lovely analogy, isn't it? So I'm steering that lifeboat tonight for those of you that don't know the Messiah and don't know Jesus. And are you ready to jump into that lifeboat this evening? Because there'll come a day, and I've told you before that my uncle died within 2 weeks. My father died 3 months later, although both of them were wonderfully saved. God is merciful, but there comes a time when time runs out. And we know that the times that are coming in the moment upon the world, how short, you can think, is it 5 to 12 at the moment? I'm not pushing people psychologically and say, you need to be saved. Well, you do need to be saved. But those of you that don't know the Messiah, it's your opportunity this evening to accept him into your heart. And all you have to do, as I say, is ask God to forgive you for the sins that you've committed. Just like I did when I told you when I became a believer in 1976. There's that process. You say, Lord, I'm sorry, forgive me, restore me, heal me, and I want to know your true salvation. And that's as simple as that, but it has to be from the heart. And I've told you those stories this evening for a reason. Both of those conversions of my father and my uncle were heartfelt, and mine was too. The first time it happened, it didn't happen. But the second time in the morning, I felt that prayer with all my heart, and I said it. And as I say, I just started to weep and cry. And God saved me. And I've just gone on then to share his glory. So, as I say, I've given you numerous examples this evening